Hi everyone, my name is Josie. I work for OPWDD. We're going to get ready to start our meeting, but before we do, I wanted to go over a couple options that we offer you. Today's meeting is being offered in closed captioning. On your right-hand side of your screen, there should be a multimedia viewer. If you click that and go to the bottom, it should say allow external link. That will allow closed captioning. If the font is too small, you can go just above where the typing is occurring and you can change the font size. We also offer American Sign Language interpreting. If you look at the thumbnails of people, you'll see two people. Before their name, it says ASL interpreter. You can pin their thumbnail to your screen. They go back and forth between the two of them. If you pin them both, you'll be able to see them at all times. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to the chairperson.
Many of you since last year and in 2020, so I can say Happy New Year for 2021. Quite a year. So I'm just going to do a brief review. And I'm getting back now. I'm not sure why that's happening. I'll just pause 1 minute if there's a reason why. Maybe I need to put something on mute. Okay, seems better now, so sorry about that. But let me start by reviewing today's agenda, and then we will move to the first agenda item after introductions. So after introductions today, we have a guest presenter, Dr. Noor Syed, who I will introduce after the introductions. Then we want to have a board discussion on some potential new recommendations. Hopefully all of you had an opportunity to review those. I believe Greg and the team at OPWDD sent those out ahead of time to give people at least a few minutes to ponder those before the discussion today, and then we'll wrap up and talk about next steps. So I'm going to go across my screen, if that's okay, just so folks get to see the faces and hear a brief introduction from everybody. Again, I'm Courtney Burke, Chair of the Autism Spectrum Advisory Board. And next on my screen is Mary Boatfield. So Mary, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Mary Boatfield. I'm the president and CEO of Happiness House and CP Rochester, and the board chair of the Golisano Autism Center.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. Okay, we'll move to Connie Donahue.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Connie Donahue. I'm the director of the Bureau of Early Intervention in the New York State Department of Health.
Great, thanks. Good to see you. We'll go to Donna Bradbury next. Donna.
Good morning, everybody. Donna Bradbury. I serve as the Associate Commissioner for the Children and Families Division at the New York State Office of Mental Health.
Great. I see two folks from OPWDD, Greg Roberts and then Jill Pettinger. So Greg.
Hi, I'm Greg Roberts. I'm the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for OPWDD, and I sort of help to serve as support for the board.
Great. And I see Dr. Jill Pettinger.
Good morning, everyone. Jill Pettinger, Deputy Commissioner with OPWDD. I oversee state operations and statewide services. I'm also a licensed psychologist and have had an interest in working on this topic for a number of years on program, policy, regulatory level. So glad to be here.
Thanks, Greg and Jill, two of my former colleagues. Keep up the great work. We'll move to Kristen Thatcher.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kristen Thatcher. I'm on the Autism Board, the Autism Advisory Board. That's it. I am autistic myself. I'm a lobbyist, and yeah, I also work for AHRC.
Awesome. Thank you for your many things that you do to advocate. Vicki Haifa.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Vicki Haifa. I'm the Acting Executive Director for the New York State Developmental Disabilities Planning Council, and I also am a mother of a 27-year-old adult son with autism, so I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you, Vicki. Okay, I see Dixie Yonkers. I'm not sure if she's on by phone. If Dixie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Yes, my name's Dixie Yonkers. I'm working in the communications office at OPWDD. I'm also the parent of a young adult on the autism spectrum, so I'm very happy to be here listening in. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen Curve comes next on my screen. Ellen? And then you're on mute, Ellen.
Ellen does our closed captioning. Ellen does our closed captioning.
Well, thank you, Ellen, for doing the closed captioning. I also see our sign language interpreter, Lisa. Can't see the whole name, Ray something, but thank you, Lisa, for providing those services today. Helen, you?
I serve as a research scientist for the Institute for Basic Research here on Staten Island, which is a research arm of OPWDD.
Very important research indeed. So thanks for what you do, Helen.
Thank you.
Yes, I see Michael Gilberg.
Hi, I'm going to stay with my video off because I'm eating breakfast and just got up. I'm on the Self-Advocate Advisory Panel, and I'm a special ed attorney on the spectrum myself.
Thank you, Michael. Mike Tripati.
Hey everybody, my name is Mike Tripodi. I'm one of the, I'm an autistic adult. I'm on that advisory panel. I work as an emergency manager with both the Red Cross and a couple other agencies, where I serve as one of the disability integration advisors at national headquarters. I'm also vice president of the board of directors of the Autism Society of the Greater Capital Region.
Great, great. So the only other person that I have not introduced yet is Dr. Noor Syed, and I just want to make sure before I introduce her that I didn't miss anyone. Okay, that's good. All right, well, I am so pleased that we have Dr. Noor Syed to present today. She and I had a chance to meet via Zoom, of course, a couple months ago. I was very impressed with all that she is doing. She's an assistant professor of applied behavioral analysis and clinical coordinator, and she is the founding director of the Center for Autism Inclusivity. And it's located at the School of Graduate Studies at SUNY Empire College. So Noor, great to see you again. Very excited that we have the opportunity to hear from you today about the program that the institute that you started and the work that you're doing and the difference that I think it could make in New York State, and thought it was very important for the Autism Advisory Board to learn more about what you were doing. So without further ado, Dr. Syed.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Courtney, for your kind words. And I'm so honored to be here. And I really appreciate you allowing me to take this time. So thank you. I'm going to try to share my PowerPoint. Let's see if this is successful. Okay. Can we see a PowerPoint that says increasing access and inclusivity?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right, wonderful. So again, it is such an honor to be here presenting to all of you and for coming on this journey with me, because it very much is a journey that is not linear, quite circular. And I'm very much looking forward to gaining your feedback and to your thoughts for this endeavor that we are engaging in with SUNY Empire. So as I believe, everyone here knows very well, increasing access to higher education for individuals who identify with autism or as neurodiverse is a significant need. Our research suggests that approximately 1% to 2% of college students identify as neurodiverse, but I would argue that this is quite a conservative number for various reasons. Students in higher education have reported feeling a pressure to normalize, struggling with things such as advocacy, and also comorbid diagnoses such as ADHD, depression, and really being able to communicate their needs effectively within a higher education setting. And certainly that has broader ramifications because there's a significant need to increase workforce accessibility, transition planning, all of these things that are part and parcel of growing independence and advocacy for all of us, including our colleagues who identify with autism or as neurodiverse. Interestingly, the College Autism Network has identified, at my last count, about 84 higher education institutions in the United States that report specific supports, pathways for individuals with autism. But I think it's really critical to note that many of these programs require self-disclosure, which again is an area that we want to be considerate of because some students have reported not feeling comfortable in disclosing or in registering with an office for reasons such as struggling with this idea of having to normalize or even potentially stigma that's attached to any type of diagnosis within a higher education setting. So what we're hoping to do with our endeavor is to ameliorate that need. So one thing that I am very excited about in coming to SUNY Empire, where I started just in September of last year, is that SUNY Empire State College, I believe, really starts to set a precedent that I've seen in my higher ed institutions for inclusivity. SUNY Empire has historically served what we might describe as non-traditional students. So families who are people who are working full-time, have families, those who might prefer online learning. So it was quite interesting. If we're looking at a silver lining of the COVID-19 pandemic, it was that we recognized a significant need to better understand how to serve students online, therefore increasing access to coursework. And I'm really proud to say that SUNY Empire State College has always traditionally done online learning, really thinking about what are those evidence-based ways to engage our students while allowing our students to access the coursework when their busy schedules allow them to do so. And so with that, SUNY Empire actually has 80 campuses statewide and a really robust online presence, which does allow us to reach students that potentially a more traditional brick and mortar higher ed institution may not necessarily have the capacity to do at this time. Now, in our discussion throughout the entire morning, and I do hope to give a brief presentation and then take your thoughts and your questions, a goal is very much to create compassionate resources. And so by that, I mean, I am very humbled and privileged to be part of this and to oversee the center, but I am not an expert in what is needed within higher education for those who identify as neurodiverse, identify with autism, any other support need. And so all of what we are doing, we hope and are striving for that this is driven by the autism community, by individuals who identify with autism, by their caregivers, those who are looking for higher ed institutions or have been and have feedback, because we want to create these resources that are truly important within the community. Two, we want to create resources that lend themselves to sustainability within SUNY Empire State College. And if anyone's familiar with a higher ed institution, we know that many faculty and staff, certainly, and COVID-19, of course, has added to this, have a number of responsibilities and can often feel like they're shouldering a large burden. So how do we create supports that fit within what someone feels that they can reasonably do without being an extra burden again, because the goal is that these supports sustain over time, that we're not sort of giving a training and checking off a box to say we did this, but instead we're really looking at the entire culture and community in the campus so that everything that we are engaging in lasts and really becomes part of the culture within SUNY Empire State College and hopefully beyond. So it is our goal to create these compassionate resources for our students, our faculty, and our staff so that we can create a culture of inclusivity and sustainability. A very brief overview of what some of what we have found and what we'll talk a little bit about today is that we know that students who identify as neurodiverse bring incredible strengths to higher ed institutions, to workforce, to the world, really. And I might argue that some of those strengths have been underutilized. And so we know there are areas such as adhering to rules, passion about interests. These are just some of the things that research has supported or research suggests, but there are even more incredible strengths that all of our students bring to the table, and certainly our students who identify with autism do. And we want to really cater to that and show our colleagues at SUNY Empire State College how incredible it is to create a fully inclusive institution. And I will say, you know, I'd love to share in this forum that I've been now part of a few different higher education institutions, and bar none, SUNY Empire has really embraced this idea, whereas other institutions I've been a part of has not necessarily been as open, welcoming, and forthcoming with this. So I think it's really important that we are recognizing the strengths of all of our students. Research has also suggested that preferred supports may include areas such as academic coaching, peer mentoring, faculty mentoring, and transition programming. A lot of schools do have these. SUNY Empire certainly has areas such as academic coaching, faculty mentoring, but I think at least at SUNY Empire, it can stand to be a bit more streamlined. So again, we're meeting the needs of all of our students. We'll talk a little bit about some of the data that we've collected so far, but our initial data collection suggests that there very much needs to be at SUNY Empire clarity in systems and expectations, streamlining systems processing, and essentially universal supports for our students and for our faculty and our staff. Two, as I mentioned earlier, our staff and faculty, alongside of this, these data we've collected with our students, indicate that there needs to be supports that, again, do not feel overly time-consuming, so that we're gaining more buy-in and really creating an institution that we hope will be fully inclusive and supportive of all of our students. So in the work that I'll be sharing with you today, the Center for Autism Inclusivity, which I oversee, has collaborated with our SUNY Empire College Office of Accessibility, Resources, and Services. So that is our office that our students who might identify with different level of support needs will reach out. It does at this time require disclosure and registration, but once that is in place, then there can be things such as accommodations. So we work quite collaboratively with the Office of Accessibility, Resources, and Services, who certainly know the culture and the students at SUNY Empire very well. Once the students register, they receive academic accommodations and faculty are notified. But an area of growth for us, an area of need at SUNY, is that we're not yet really considering things such as what happens next. Because students report after registering that they still may encounter social challenges, behavioral challenges, and emotional challenges. We receive, or the office receives, numerous calls and emails from faculty and staff seeking support in working with our students, and students seeking support in how to work with faculty and staff at SUNY Empire. So we know that there is room for us to improve. There are also a number of students that we believe, and whom I've actually spoken with privately, that are choosing not to register with our office for the reasons that we discussed earlier today. they may choose not to because of that perceived stigma, negative past school experiences, or even the thought that they may not actually need specific accommodations and therefore it's not worthwhile to register. But they may choose and have chosen to self-disclose to different faculty, staff, or peers, again, helping us to realize that there is a lot of room for growth in meeting the needs of all of our students. So what does it mean for SUNY Empire to become an autism supportive college? We very much, in this endeavor, want to fully support all of our students through what we call a multi-tiered system of support framework. So one of the first things that we want to do is assess challenges that are faced by our students, our faculty, and our staff. What are the barriers that currently exist, and how might some of these barriers be removed? I think that is incredibly vital to this mission, again, because stakeholder input is so important for us to better understand what the needs are and then how these can be addressed. While I, again, feel very fortunate to be with SUNY Empire and to be in this position, I can only bring one perspective. And certainly that, if I just brought my ideas, we would be missing some incredible opportunities for learning, incredible thoughts and ideas. And so we want to bring everybody's voice to the table so that we can seek to address all of the barriers that our students, our faculty, and our staff are perceiving, and again, seek to ameliorate those barriers. So a multi-tiered system of support framework, some of us might be familiar with that term or have heard the term responsiveness to intervention and positive behavior interventions and supports, both of which fall under this broader category of a multi-tiered system of support framework, or MTSS. These frameworks have been implemented in over 27,000, or I think now we're over 30,000 schools and districts across the United States with a great degree of success, and that is looking at the K through 12 district. Positive behavior interventions and supports is this idea that we will implement universal supports to help students become successful socially, emotionally, in terms of appropriate behaviors within the classroom. And then for those for whom those universal supports, a little bit more is needed, we have more intensive support structures, and we call those Tier 1 and Tier 2. It's the same thing under responsiveness to intervention. That looks a little bit more at academic needs. So across entire schools and school districts, embedding evidence-based strategies to help students succeed academically would be what we consider universal supports. And then again, more intensive supports could be implemented for those students for whom the universal designs are just not as effective. Speaking from an administrative perspective, research has strongly suggested that this actually ends up financially helping school districts, because now instead of an increased rate of suspension or expulsions, referrals, etc., the research in MTSS has strongly suggested that we start to see a decrease in disproportionality in students who are referred for suspension, a decrease in the number of students who need to access more restrictive environments, an increase in positive climate changes, increase in students feeling supported, that even meeting gains in terms of academics, there's been some really strong research there. It's been essentially a really fantastic tool, I believe, as I am a special educator as well and have taught in the classroom for over 10 years, found this to be an incredible tool. What is interesting about this is that, to the best of my knowledge, we have not implemented a similar structure within a higher education institution for our students and for our students who might identify as neurodiverse. So in thinking about how to create systems that will last over time, we thought about implementing this type of structure within SUNY Empire. And that is what we are starting to do today. So our goal here is that we will create within SUNY Empire universal, low effort and low cost support for our staff, our faculty, and most importantly, our students. Easily access resources, things that can be implemented and used without requiring self-disclosure or without requiring registration. So that we're not only, certainly while our mission right now is to create this inclusive atmosphere for our students who identify as neurodiverse in a universal support system or a universal design for learning system, we're really seeking to better our procedures and our systems for all of the students that come through SUNY Empire. And so with that low effort and cost, I think we're also going to see a greater likelihood that we will continue to have administrative buy-in, staff buy-in, and faculty buy-in, and actually give back to the SUNY Empire community by implementing things that will alleviate burdens in the future. We know that faculty have reported, let's say, spending a lot of time with students, certain students, and if some of these pieces are in place, such as an email template with allowing a student to more effectively communicate their needs within the classroom, it saves that time, opening up the faculty to other areas of responsibility and giving peace of mind to the student that they're feeling their needs are being addressed and are coming across really efficiently and effectively. So we are planning to and have started to create universal low effort and cost supports, and will be implementing more intensive tiered supports for, again, staff, faculty, and students, all trying to lend itself to this culture of sustainable change and inclusivity with our higher education institution. We're not doing this alone. I will talk about our incredible implementation team that we've begun to form. We're also working collaboratively with the Anderson Center for Autism, their flagship location located up in Stroudsburg, New York, to create these supports, engage in this data collection, and better understand if what we are doing is effective. So here is a visual of what that multi-tiered system of support framework might look like. And a colleague of mine put it very well when she described it as sort of, if we think about when we go to the doctor, when we go for our general wellness visits and our checkups, we might think of that as a universal or tier 1 support. We're trying to address or we're trying to avoid any other issues by implementing universal practices. But for some of us, we might need to go back again for follow-up tests. Hopefully not, but we know that happens. That might be your tier 2. And then for some of us, we might need to go into treatment, which would be our tier 3. So that's exactly the type of mindset and framework that we're bringing, or we're hoping to bring to SUNY Empire. Again, what are those standard practices and procedures across the entire institution that can help our students succeed? And we're not only looking at doing this for students, but we're also looking at doing this for faculty and staff regarding neurodiversity and autism, so that on both sides, we're preparing faculty and staff to be supportive of our students who identify as neurodiverse, and we're preparing our students who might identify as neurodiverse, or in general, all of our students to be successful within the higher ed institution. So all the students, all the faculty staff will have tier 1 supports and then move into tier 2, tier 3 if they're needed. So an example of what these supports might look like, and again, we're in our beginning stages, this is our journey, but what we're starting to see are some areas such as clear and consistent communication practices within a tier 1 system, core syllabi and outlines that have clear, predictable deadlines, maybe projects that allow for iteration and feedback throughout the course, group work embedded within a course meaningfully, because some of our students have reported needing assistance or wanting assistance in socializing with their peers. And if we're thinking too about how this could be done more successfully in an online setting, creating those group contingencies, that group work can be really great for our students. Defined expectations, defined rubrics, breaking down assignments, All of those we know might be a bit more work up front for, let's say, our faculty, but once in place can serve to be successful for the faculty and for the students in the longer term. For those for whom that might not be enough, that is okay. We can have individual check-in times with our students to see how we can help them adhere to those deadlines, meet the expectations. We can create visual and organizational tools, customized assignment checklist. And for those for whom this, again, might not be enough, and that is absolutely okay, then we have a more intensive support tier where there might be one-to-one coaching within my center or within the Office of Accessibility Supports and Services. And these are, we think, just the beginning of supports that we can implement to help our students and our faculty and staff. So where are we to date? We've started this in September 2020, so it is very new. And one area that we realized is that what we're looking at here is very much a systems change. And with all good intentions, I think that this announcement was brought down without necessarily gaining faculty and staff and students and caregiver input. It was sort of decided and implemented without any of that stakeholder feedback. And we know that without that stakeholder feedback, it is a lot more difficult for any initiative to be successful. So when this came down, I'll candidly share that I received a bit of pushback from our faculty and staff, significantly centered around the concern of additional workload and being very cognizant of the shifts, let's say under COVID-19 and all the responsibilities that we have within a higher ed institution. We realized that we very much needed to gain that feedback and gain that input, hopefully leading to stakeholder buy-in. So we went back and I held a number of formal and informal facilitated discussions to solicit the thoughts of the faculty and staff. And I'm super excited to share that since we have done that, which began to occur earlier in the semester, January, February, we have seen a shift in level of excitement, level of acceptance for this, with many faculty and staff really being quite on board with creating this inclusive educational environment. We also, within the autism community, held a series of town halls in which we sought to solicit input and feedback from our communities, and we're continuing to do that. We've got a wonderful Reason and Respect series scheduled for April. I saw Michael Gilberg is on the call. He will be part of that discussion to continue to get feedback, to continue to share this message and get that stakeholder buy-in. Again, the goal is that these are compassionate changes that last over time so that we can engage in that all-important systems change. We have started to collect data. We have gotten student and volunteer feedback on our onboarding systems, our mentorship procedures, the ease of use on our website, areas of need from our undergraduate and our graduate students. Those sessions will continue throughout the course of the next few years in gaining feedback. We will continue to hold focus groups, interviews, and we will continue to conduct surveys to get a sense of what the strongest needs are with our students, therefore implementing our student recommendations. And we are working with students who have self-disclosed and students who have not self-disclosed, as well as students who perhaps identify as neurotypical. So we are really trying to gain a holistic understanding of the needs within SUNY Empire. We've also done this with our faculty and staff. We have held, as I talked about earlier, larger events as well as one-to-one interviews, focus groups with faculty, with staff to gain a better understanding of their recommendations. And this will be continuing as well over the next few years as we do our trainings and as we create these supports. The goal is that we are not waiting till the end, quote unquote, of any type of system to gain feedback. We want to gain feedback throughout the entire process so that we can iterate and make this work for the SUNY Empire State College and autism communities. We have to date held our first round of training with faculty and professional employees on how to support students who identify with autism in a higher education setting. We have our next training scheduled for April, and these will also continue over the course of our next couple of months and the course of our next few years. We have also begun to create tangible support structures, such as email templates. So for example, one area of need that we have discovered through our data collection within the college is that effective and clear communication is a need. For example, how do I file my FAFSA? So we have begun to create email templates that our departments will post very clearly on their website. If you have a question about your PIN number, use this email, and the student simply has to input their name and maybe a specific piece of information, and they then very clearly know to whom to send it. That is, while it's a very small thing, has already demonstrated success because information is being given to the right person a lot more efficiently, which can make the difference in someone filing on time versus someone not filing on time, and a huge difference in peace of mind and quality of life. And that is being utilized by all of our students, all of our departments. We have also, I'm very excited to share, created a multi-tiered system of support implementation team. And this is spearheaded and driven by individuals who identify as neurodiverse and caregivers of individuals who identify as neurodiverse or as autistic self-advocates. And so these are SUNY Empire State College students. These are students who are seeking and families who are seeking for their children to go to college, and those who are in college for a different institution, and those who have graduated. To get a better sense of how, again, we can address these needs and to do it in a really compassionate manner. This implementation team will meet more regularly in the beginning, and then we'll start to move towards becoming an advisory board for our MTSS framework. The team also consists of SUNY Empire faculty and staff, including my incredible colleagues at the Office of Accessibility Supports and Services. Again, because we want to make sure that we are working within the culture of the institution, leading us towards a systems change of compassion and inclusivity. It's also made up with behavior analysts, multi-tiered systems of support specialists, and data scientists, because another area that we want to make sure that we are doing is to collect our data continuously over time to help inform our work. Is what we are doing effective? Is it changing the climate? Does someone who identify with autism feel like they are increasingly supported? If not, we need to change what we're doing and to better fit the needs. Two, our sincere hope is to disseminate this work and potentially provide a model for other institutions. And so we hope to be able to present this at conferences, publish these data with the sincere goal to bring out the messaging of what we are doing, solicit that feedback, and hope that this is something that others feel that they can engage in. Our first meeting with the implementation team is scheduled to be held in the spring, and we are very much looking forward to that. So what are our future plans? And again, I know I mentioned this a few times, but I appreciate you taking this journey with me because it has been a bit of a winding path as I've not done this before. And so we are trying to figure out each step as we go and plan for the future. So through 2021, we're going to continue faculty and staff training These are regularly scheduled to happen over the course of the spring, summer, and fall. We are creating and piloting a peer mentorship program that will launch through the Center for Autism Inclusivity. And so this might be what we consider a more intensive support tier, or part of a more intensive support tier, as it would require students to share, even if not registering with the Office of Accessibility Supports and Services, to share with me that they do identify in any way as neurodiverse or as an autistic advocate. So we are going to create this mentorship program. The goal is that we are building social structures for students to feel like they have someone to talk to and to go to beyond staff and faculty, that it doesn't only serve when they're in school, but that we're creating a network, that someone feels like they have that support system. They have friends, lifelong friends that last with them, over time, that they can go to. And so trying to meet that need that our students have reported as significant within SUNY Empire. We're going to continue creating our permanent products, such as those email templates, our systems processing maps, our task analyses, towards the barriers that have been identified within SUNY Empire in the creation of these universal supports. We will be prioritizing these tasks with our implementation team so that we can have a better understanding of what we can feasibly do now. That is the greatest need for within the SUNY Empire community and the autism community. But we're also looking towards the future, and I've listed here 2 to 5 years. Time will tell if it will be longer or if it will be shorter, but what we are planning to do over the course of the next few years is that we will actually now be requiring training and supporting all of our students, particularly those with autism, annually. The same way, let's say our staff will are required to take harassment training annually, this will become an annual training, and we have full support of administration for that. So I'm super excited. Part of SUNY Empire's culture is that all of the departments and all of the colleges meet monthly. Faculty meetings, each department meets regularly. And right now, as part of those meetings, are discussions, of course, about the needs and how to support our students. We will be requiring that there is embedded discussion within all meetings with how to support our students who identify as neurodiverse or with autism and other levels of support needs. I will be there to facilitate these discussions, reinforce these discussions are happening, give feedback, as will our colleagues. Some of these discussions will actually already happen. They happen through our informal Center for Mentorship and Learning. Now it's going to be part of the framework, a more formal framework. Again, the goal is that it is a regular piece of what we do, so that everyone expects to have these conversations, lending itself to that culture that we discussed. We will be creating a repository of readily available resources for our faculty and staff. We will be creating templates, system processing maps, rubrics, syllabi that someone can plug their information into that meets this need of a universal support, really clear expectations. We will be revising the website. While it's chock full of information, our data have suggested that it is not necessarily user-friendly. So all of our students have reported that, and that's an area of growth for us. Again, this is just the beginning. We're going to be adding to these lists as we continue to collect our data and figure out what the greatest needs are. We will also be creating these more intensive support structures like we discussed, facilitated discussions, one-to-one coaching, regularly scheduled synchronous training, in addition to any asynchronous trainings that our faculty and staff will take, so that there's more if the universal supports are not enough for our faculty and staff. And of course, doing this for our students, our number one utmost priority. We will be working with academic support services, to embed these pieces within new student orientation, how to effectively communicate, what types of training are faculty and staff doing, what to expect. We want to make sure that all of our students feel prepared when they enter school. And there will also be a repository of those resources, this time geared for students. All of these things, again, hopefully addressing this need to self-disclose, because the students won't necessarily have to do that since this will be available at their fingertips. We'll create these templates, these systems processing maps, and of course, more intensive support structures. We're working with the Office of Accessibility and Supports to build out their offerings, and of course, referring students there as they feel it's needed. We will also be creating trainings for college readiness, workforce readiness, job interview skills, how to build a resume, advocacy training within the college institution, but also beyond the college institution. What are my rights as I leave the school and I'm looking to be gainfully employed? How do I advocate for better salaries, which I think arguably many of our students could identify with and might need some support with. Social skills training or social skills opportunities, I should say, for those who are interested. We will have facilitated social skills groups or social events, as well as more universal supports in that area, and building out our peer mentorship. Again, this is just the beginning of what we are hoping to do. We do as well want to create a pathway for students with higher support needs. Another area that SUNY Empire State College has really prided itself on is that it differs from many other more traditional undergraduate institutions in that here our undergraduate students can really create their own major. They can build their own coursework. We offer a lot of independent studies. If there's a topic that interests you, we want to provide it for you. So my goal here is also to create a pathway, let's say, for students who might come and take courses such as how to live independently, how to get ready for the workforce. That this could be embedded actually into a credit-bearing load, so that can be part of a degree sequence. Certainly, these are really involved endeavors. Many people will be part of these conversations, but we've already started to have them because I think it is so critical that we are meeting the needs not only of students who might identify as lower support, but also students who might identify as higher support. And this has been an area that we've gotten a lot of feedback on as of need. We will also be outreaching to high school and transition programs. Our research has also suggested that that is an area for growth for all of us, and we want to help provide that support for the students as they move from high school to higher education. And throughout the way, as I mentioned, we'll be collecting data on social validity. Are these things feasible for you? Do they feel comfortable for you? Is this something that you feel like you can use again with ease? What's the climate? How happy do you feel at SUNY Empire? Do you feel supported? For the faculty and staff, do you feel like we're moving towards a more inclusive institution? Again, constantly gaining that feedback and that buy-in along the way. Other pieces of data that we will be collecting: downloads to resources, hits to these websites, the number of participants that we've trained over time. It's exciting for me to see that start to increase as we finally have begun to engage in these endeavors. A number of mentors, mentees, what our alumni are doing after they leave the school, the number of students self-disclosing or registering, and the number of students who simply come to the center without requiring a self-disclosure, but to share their experiences and to be part of some of what we are doing. And again, this is just the beginning. So my hope is that we start to see this generalized to other organizations, other schools. Very proud to say that SUNY Empire is part of a broader network of higher ed public schools in New York. I think we are one of 64. And so there is interest from other SUNY schools. I've been collaborating with colleagues across the SUNY system, very much so, as well as the entity that oversees all of the SUNYs. And we're hoping that as we start to see success, that this will be something that will be adopted by other public schools within New York, but also other schools in general, which is our plan for dissemination over time. We would love for this to be a model for other higher education institutions if it is effective, and I certainly hope it will be on our way there. Again, to address that need for the students we're not yet reaching, the ones who are not yet comfortable in disclosing, therefore limiting their desire to, let's say, take one of those pathways that we talked about before, one of those 84 pathways that exist in the United States. We want to increase access, of course, to gainful employment, create a clear pathway for our high school students, and a private hope I'll share here is that in this, that we begin to address, that some of that need that we're seeing in terms of behavior analysis and autism, because PBI, multi-tiered system of support framework, positive behavior supports, responsiveness to intervention are all embedded within behavior analysis. And with this endeavor driven by those who identify with autism, I hope that we begin to address that broader need, while of course serving this incredible issue of the lack of inclusivity in our institution, we feel, for students who identify as neurodiverse, and then hopefully within the broader community. So thank you very, very much again for your time and for today and for your attention. I'm incredibly grateful for it. And I'm happy to take any questions or thoughts.
Thank you, Noor. That was incredibly comprehensive.
I agree.
Hey,
if you,
go ahead. Looks like we have a question. Please go.
Oh, no, I don't think I had the question. I just wanted to say how much I was interested in this presentation, and it was so inclusive. You covered so many areas that I was about to ask a question and you already had prepared the answer. Was most interested in how you can bring this information towards the high school level to prepare, college-bound students who don't know where to go, and also to inform the counselors, the principals about this, wonderful endeavor that you have started, because I'm very interested in helping students get into college. They don't know where to go. I offer scholarships through our charity, and I'm often getting nobody's going to college from this group of children who are on the spectrum. So maybe they are withholding that information. They don't know where to go, so they're in a holding pattern. Mm-hmm. So with this, New York State Empire program available, I think you might get a great number of students who would like to know more about it. So got to get the word out.
Thank you. I appreciate your feedback. We definitely want to. I'll very candidly share, it's been just me so far, but we are growing. We're bringing on another faculty. We're building up the center. And Anderson Center has been amazing too. So over the next couple of months, I will start to outreach to high schools, transition programs, sharing this work to see how we can build that pathway, because I agree, I think that's really, really critical for that success. And we want students to know that this is happening, that faculty and staff are being trained to support you, that there is an inclusive institution where we hope that you feel like you can be yourself and share or not share, but that supports are still in place. So thank you for your kind words and for your feedback. That is really key and is next. Any thoughts about how we should go about it? We are very welcome to that. Any types of, if there's a specific organization that might have access to different transition programming, I would be grateful for any of those thoughts, because the most efficient and effective way to disseminate this, I don't yet have a good understanding of that. So I appreciate your kindness, and will definitely want to share this with high schools.
I just wanted to add that on Long Island, where I live, there's a school called Adelphi University. They have a Bridges to Adelphi, which is based on campus. It is supportive of children on the spectrum, young adults, And what they really now are transitioning, not just from high school, but to the next step. You need a network of companies, hospitals, or whatever that will come into the campus to help with the interview process, with supporting with employment. And it's something that is probably most difficult, that I think anyway, transitioning from college to employment, like you said, gainful employment.
Yes, definitely.
Need to build that relationship on the outside, of the outside world.
Thank you. And it's a terrific program, the Bridges program, where I look to it actually quite a bit. I love that program. And so something that I think we can help, if there's a gap, let's say, is that online, so building these support systems for students who choose to be online, because we do a lot of online work. I think that can help as well. Because a lot of our students come from areas where there aren't access to brick and mortar institutions. So we're hoping to meet that need as well. But I love what Adelphi does. I also think Project Reach and the CUNY systems is a really, really great system also. Our students have reported a need for that online piece. So thank you too, because I appreciate you bringing that up. That's a terrific organization.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Mary Lou, thanks for all your comments. I see some of them being echoed in the chat with somebody saying how wonderful it would be if this approach were available at all colleges, which was a point you made, and high schools and so on. Steve Katz, I think it is volunteering. I want to help, and there's a need to more outreach to the community. Another point, Mary Lou, that you made. And Noor, you should consider this committee a vehicle for you to get this information out, because you've got a lot of agency representatives on this on the spectrum, autism spectrum disorders group, and they can disseminate this to various people that they deal with and that they support through their agencies. So please, please keep that in mind. I just wanted to pause there and see if there are other questions and comments for Noor.
Kristen has her hand up.
Hi, this is Kristen right here. I gotta say, wow. I mean, that's the things I've been trying to fight for many years. Like make every all of this, like for disabilities and non-disabled people to have the same services. Cause I know a lot of people who does need life skills and job interview prep and everything. Not just people with disabilities need those things. And I think it's very important for everybody to be able to get those services, not people with disabilities. So it will equal everything. Like, so yes, you maybe have autism, or yes, you might not have a disability, but you can get the same services. I think that's amazing. And I'm here to help if needed, because I'm an advocate. I can talk to a lot of people. Have you ever heard of Bay Ridge Prep? It's a high school. It has a bridge program in Brooklyn. I went to that school, and they're really good there too. They probably can partner with them too.
Kristen, that would be insane. I would gratefully take you up on.
I'm over.
Thank you. If you would be kind as to shoot me an email, Steve, I saw, I think, in the chat as well. I would be really grateful to connect with you and connect with these programs and to get your input on more that we can do. It would be such an honor. So I will say yes, please, to all of those offers, because I think I know that will only make this better. We're feeling our way. We're doing it one step at a time. And the more input that we can have from the community, I think the better we will be. And Kristen, thank you for those very kind words. That truly, truly made my day.
Well, great.
Very welcome.
Is anybody else? I don't have the ability necessarily to see if people have hands raised. I just want to make sure we don't miss any further questions. Okay. Well, Noor, it's amazing work that you're doing, so incredibly comprehensive. It's so exciting to see it. So thank you for presenting today. We look forward to hearing more from you in the future. I hope you do hear directly from some of the folks on this committee, and keep up the great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
All right. Well, that was really great. Very inspiring. Amazing what Noor is doing there at SUNY Empire State College. So we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is a board discussion on the recommendations that we had sent out. You know, Noor alluded to silver linings and things, and I think for better or worse, one of the things that the pandemic has highlighted is the lack of equity in a lot of different programs and services for a variety of people. So one of the things that came out was identifying strategies and methods for improving outreach and coordination of services associated with autism spectrum disorders for minority groups, and including but not limited to African Americans, Latinos, and Asian children. So we had circulated 2 recommendations, and I'm going to go over each one, and I'll read the first one, pause, see if we can get some reactions or talk about it a little bit, and then I'll read the second one. So the first one is that the New York State Autism Spectrum Disorders Board recommends that New York State agencies take concrete steps to ensure that policy decisions include consideration of equal access to services for all New Yorkers. To help further this goal, agency leaders should establish decision-making processes that solicit input from stakeholders representing service recipients from minority communities. So that was, I wanted to see if we could get any reaction to that first suggestion.
I was wondering who's going to be collecting this data, who to provide it to the New York State Office of People for Developmental Disabilities. Who do you expect this information to be reported to and then sent to us? How will this transition take place?
Great question. You've got some wonderful staff from OPWDD on the WebEx today. It pretty much will end up being their job, but they have done a wonderful job so far. So I don't know if Greg or Jill wants to add anything to that, now that you've been voluntold.
Yeah, so this is Greg. Mary Lou, what we would do if these recommendations are adopted by the board, what we would do is we would work with other state agencies, including OPWDD, and we would seek to build these structures within the OPWDD decision-making process. As over the last few months, as we've gone over last year's recommendations, some of them the state has made some good strides in achieving, some not so much. We hope the next report highlights where progress has been made, as well as where more progress needs to be made. But it's our goal that these recommendations that you put forward don't sit there and gather dust. It's our goal that we seek to implement them and improve, improved situation for everybody in New York. So by that means, we'll try and get this on the agency's list of things to do. So we want this to have action come out of the recommendation, not just empty government speak stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Great question. That would also apply to the second bullet. And let me just read the second bullet, which is similar because it's asking the New York State agencies to do the following. So we're asking them to review their service delivery systems to determine if services are being delivered in an equitable manner and inform the public of the results. Wherever the data indicates an inequitable distribution of services, agencies should review relevant policies and procedures with the goal of improving access to services for underserved communities. So that's the second recommendation. So they're, similar in that they ask the agency to carry out the research and then the actual recommendations of improving where there are inequities. So I'll pause again to see if there's any comments or questions.
I think they should. I think.
This is Mary Oakfield. I'm not sure. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
On mute. There you go. I just want to make sure in early intervention health starting at a very early age. And then the state ed, we are a very large preschool provider, and certainly I think this needs to start, at the time of early identification, evaluation, and preschool. So I know OPWDD is coordinating, but I think we need to really make sure we include children prior to entering that system.
Sure. Hi, Courtney. It's Connie.
Hey,
if you can hear me okay.
Yes.
We in early intervention are already working on a data set. We were required to give certain breakdowns to OSEP in our annual reporting, but we've taken those many steps further and they're under department review. So I think that information, I agree with Mary, if you can measure things, you can change them if you need to do that. So I think that information will be very valuable as we go forward. And you're right, we have to start early. Although I will say that every time I'm on one of these meetings, I'm very humbled because we are important, but we're also such a short blip on the screen when you think about a whole lifetime. And I was fascinated to hear about the higher ed considerations today. But yes, we certainly will continue to work on that data, and we'll release it when it's finally approved, which is, I think we're getting close.
Great comment, Mary, and thanks, Connie, for what you're already doing in that regard.
I have something to say.
Go ahead, Kristen.
So I think it's important for the services to get better, yes. But I also think that the agencies don't work together. So what if one agency doesn't have one thing and then they have another thing that another agency does? So I think they should talk to each other, and so we can get all this, everything we need to succeed in our lives.
No, it's a great point, Kristen, and this committee has talked many times about the importance of interagency coordination. I think you're absolutely right. This is another area where some coordination around the issue of identifying where there are disparities may be helpful. So I'll think about that and how we might incorporate that into the language of our recommendations. Maybe we'll add a bit about also interagency coordination. That was certainly a part of our original recommendations. So great suggestion, Kristen.
Steve has his hand up.
Yes, in the previous presentation, I mentioned outreach, and I think the same is true for OPWDD. I run a number of support groups each month, and when I mention, well, you need to apply for OPWDD services, and people have no idea. And I say, well, you need to start with the front door. Never heard of it. I think there needs to be, I don't know if it's outreach or just more information out in the community that you can apply for OPWDD services. There's the front door session. There are other sessions depending on what you need. And there is also what they used to call service coordination. Now it's care coordination, and you can have somebody help you through the process at a care coordination agency as well. And people just don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think that's another great suggestion of just making sure that all the agencies are publicizing, communicating whenever there's an opportunity for that. Great.
Steve, do you have any ideas of how agencies could do that more effectively?
Well, I'm thinking, especially when people are transitioning to adulthood, they age out of the school system, that students at that age and their parents need to be made aware. If you go to the schools, OPWDD, the care coordination agencies could go to the schools, because for a lot of students, they do okay in grade school, but by the time they're in high school, they're already having trouble with the social aspects, and maybe they're hitting a wall even academically. And in college, it's, college, or if you're out there in the community trying to find a job, there aren't the resources that the schools have. There isn't the structure anymore. A lot of people, they wind up in a dormitory and they have no idea how to manage their time and how to be social. And so I think that's an important transition time for students and parents to become aware of all that's available. And even in adulthood, I think a lot of the folks that I'm dealing with, my program is for adults on the spectrum. And they're struggling with school, they're struggling with work, they're struggling just to be social at all. And they don't know what's out there. They find, because I'm on social media, they find me. And I'm the first person to tell them about OPWDD and Front Door and care coordination and applying for a waiver and all these things they've never even heard of before.
Okay. Good suggestions, Steve, about getting the word out. Appreciate that. Any other comments on the two recommendations?
Yeah, this is Jill, and I just want to follow up on what Steve was referencing, and Connie certainly made reference to it in her point as well about really having to look at services across the lifespan. I think there tends to be, a focus on what's happening for individuals when they're school age, and Noor's presentation really pointed out that the importance of the intersections to different developmental stages of individuals as they're growing, developing, and moving through the lifespan, and they need different types of supports or resources, and they're going to look very different at those different junctures. And I think that piece about getting the word out and understanding what service array there is, and that interagency and cross-agency collaboration is going to be really critical to address the needs of individuals on the spectrum. So again, I think it's just underscoring that need for the collaboration amongst the different agencies to support individuals across their lifespan. So if there's any way to weave that sort of theme into, that's what I'm hearing people describe as one of the concerns, would be important as well.
Yes, definitely.
Courtney,
Thanks.
Connie, again, I just as a practical matter, I will just add that on transition, which Steve mentioned, there's a requirement under OSEP, the Office of Special Education programs. There's actually a requirement for the lead agencies for Part C, early intervention, and Part B, preschool special education, to have a memorandum of understanding largely around transitioning from one program to the other. So we do, actually we have that MOU, and right now it's with OSEP under review. We expect the final version, updated version back in probably early summer. So that's really an important point. And I must have been channeling, I don't know what, but we also have been working with the Front Door colleagues at OPWDD to better understand the array of services available through that avenue so that we can put together our service coordination toolkit. We're revising it from a few years back to make sure that we cover all the possibilities for families of young children with disabilities as they sort of figure out where they need to land. And in particular, we want to make sure that service coordinators are, the ongoing service coordinators are discussing those options at transition time, because the transitions are hard, whether it's from Part C to Part B, early intervention to preschool, or all the other transitions that Steve described. So, so we are working on those things, and this was a reinforcing conversation for us.
Great. Thanks, Connie. Mary Lou?
Yes, thank you. You know, I was listening to the propositions 1 and 2, which are very important. But I think when you're thinking about how do you really level the playing field, and it all comes to money. You know, if they don't have the equipment, they don't have the different devices to work with. I think many agencies or parents or communities are going to say, yeah, we all agree everybody should be treated equally, Black, brown, the underserved, but we need to have money to infiltrate that group. And I'm thinking that it's all well and good to collect data and to know and all that, but without the money to level it, what good is it going to be?
Yeah, I hear you on that. I know funding and resources are a constant challenge for the state agencies. I think, but our group, the Autism Spectrum Advisory Board, helps because we make the recommendations and we advocate, and that helps it get prioritized among the various resources that they have. And I think we always should be advocating for more of those resources. So I agree with that. But I think just us advocating for it helps move it up on the priorities for the agencies, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts or comments on the recommendations? So Greg, procedural. Oh, sorry, somebody's starting to speak. Go ahead.
Mary has her hand up.
Okay, Mary.
I think she just spoke.
Hello? No,
There we go.
Are there. It's education. A wealth of services in our communities, but we need to ensure that people have equal information and access. And then my second point was, are we as an advisory board, are we representing all of the people with autism? Are we representing, Black, brown, and underserved and minority populations? So I'll just kind of put that out there.
I was waiting to see if there was a the agency. I wasn't quite sure who the correct.
Hopefully the members of the board represent a broad group of people and your communities that you come from, and you can bring those ideas and those perspectives to the board. I think, we had discussed earlier about your recommendation from last year about the need to really go out and to make sure that we're have access to language, and that we are reaching out to everybody as we go out into the field and to try and get people into the system and to try and make awareness. So I think the report that's going to be coming out does talk about some of those strides that have been made, particularly towards people who English is not their first language, primary language. So I think the state is making strides in that direction. And I think that the report will show that some efforts are being made. I know there's been outreach to the Office of New Americans, for example, people that speak, Chinese and Mandarin, and as well as some efforts that are being made to address Spanish speakers. And I know after each of these meetings, we have had feedback from the community asking us to quickly translate these meetings into Spanish and get them up there, and we are making efforts to do that. So hopefully within a short period of time, these meetings will be accessible in other languages. So strides are being made. Mary, you're absolutely right, and we want to keep moving in that direction. And in this meeting, for example, I believe this is the first meeting that we've had ASL as well as closed caption on it. So it's taken us, even as I'd like to think that the people on this call and the agencies are enlightened, but it even took us a while to get this up and running, and too many people were being excluded before. So I do want to thank the advocates that had reached out to OPWDD and the chairperson Burke and said, this is something you really need to work on. So I think strides are being made, but Mary, you're absolutely right. It's been too slow and too long in coming. But hopefully we're moving in the right direction, and we need to just keep expanding the reach so we can reach everybody.
Agreed. And thanks again, Mary, for the comments and good points, Greg. I wanted to check one more time to see if there are any other comments, and then I wanted to ask Greg a procedural question. So are there any other comments?
I have one more comment. What about we do commercials about about OWDD and programs and all that other stuff? And why don't we go? I agree with Steve about going to schools, because I remember when I graduated high school, I didn't even know there was OWDD or all that stuff. So I think we got to get into the schools more.
No, I know commercial time on TV can be expensive, but I know OPWDD has been expanding what they're doing to get the word out in terms of social media for sure. I know they've also been using YouTube as another mechanism for getting information out. Greg, I don't know what else you all are up to these days.
This is Chris Soriano from State Ed, but as far as getting information directly into schools, we should look at existing mechanisms that we have in place. I know through the Office of Special Education, we have our very extensive educational partnership, a network of professional development providers, specialists that work directly with schools, and we're constantly pushing out information into schools that we should look to use our regional partnership centers and our family and community engagement centers. We have early childhood ones as well as school age ones that we could push any information that we feel necessary on any of these topics. We could be pushing directly out to schools through an existing mechanism through my office. So more than willing to have a conversation about utilizing something that a structure we already have in place to really reach districts directly and quickly.
Great. Thank you, Christopher, for that offer.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. I'll check one more time if there's any other comments on the recommendations.
Yeah, this is Greg. I just wanted to, Dr. Pettinger had spoken to me prior, and she wanted to comment about the discussion we had at the last meeting regarding recommendation of incarceration rates in individuals with autism. Originally, the board had talked about finding data and getting that out there, and Dr. Pettinger, her team had done a little bit of research, and so she wanted to offer perhaps a comment on that recommendation and maybe a way to move it forward. So Dr. Pettinger?
Thanks, Greg. And yeah, Courtney, I wasn't sure if you were done with all of the recommendations or just the two. So hopefully it's okay to move forward and talk about this one at this point. So following the meeting that we had in the fall, when the question was originally raised, I came back and had some discussion with my clinical staff and the staff in my Bureau of Intensive Treatment Services, which focuses on individuals who are coming into our system who have some justice system involvement, and really started to see what data we could find about individuals on the spectrum who had criminal justice system involvement, and whether there were any statistics and research articles or reports that we could find. And quite honestly, there wasn't a great deal that we could find. And we did come across a special report that the U.S. Department of Justice had issued back in December of 2015. So of course that's now 5 or 6 years old, and it was based on data that was had been gathered about disabilities among prison and jail inmates from 2011 to 2012. And at that point in time, it was indicating that inmates in state and federal prisons with cognitive disabilities, and I'm using broader terms here than autism spectrum disorders, that those with cognitive disabilities accounted for about 19.5% of the population, and the prevalence of cognitive disabilities among jail inmates accounted for about 31% of the population. But when you dig into what the Justice Report's definition of cognitive disabilities meant, is that it included a number of developmental disability diagnoses or conditions, including Down syndrome, autism and dementia, attention deficit disorder, learning disorders, intellectual disabilities, or traumatic brain injury. So that's a very broad list of developmental disability diagnoses or categories. So my concern is that Justice Department of Justice report probably is an overrepresentation of reflecting individuals with autism spectrum disorders, and in fact we couldn't really dig in and find anything that was very specific to the AFC population. So we looked at whether there was any state statistics, and there are no statistics that were specific to the population of individuals with ASD. We looked at other published research, again, not finding a lot, and certainly nothing that was recent. We were finding things from 2015, 2012. Again, studies that looked at broader categories of developmental disability representation in populations of those involved with the criminal justice system, whether it be in jail or prison. So my concern with going out with a recommendation that says, and I'll just read the one that was on our meeting agenda, was that New York State Autism Spectrum Disorders Board recommends that New York State publish data regarding the incarceration rates of individuals with autism. So my concern is that the state is not yet in a position to even have a concrete set of data that could be published, and I think we would have to engage in some efforts to really clarify what is the data set that we're seeking and who would have that data set, and then we would have to work with those state agencies. I'm thinking it's the Department of Correctional Services, but it could also be some other, we may need to look at some other data through the court system. So again, I think we have to do a little bit more work on defining what it is that is being requested. And I understand the interest that was expressed by the committee at our last meeting in gathering this information. But again, I think if we don't clearly define what it is that we're seeking to gather, that the information that's produced is not going to be actually address the concern that the board had expressed. So I just wanted to raise that and give you guys some thoughts and information about what I did find, and just see what your thoughts are about perhaps modifying the recommendation, and perhaps it's modifying the recommendation to say that the board will review available data regarding incarceration rates, and that we then can further define what it is that we're actually seeking, and we can do some initial more formal diving into the research data and talking to Department of Corrections and other parties that may have the type of information that we're seeking, and see if there's a way for us to, in a very more tangible and concrete way, gather the exact information that we're seeking.
That's really helpful, Jill, to know that it's much more difficult than we had thought to get that data and identify that data. Based on what you're saying, it sounds like we should pause on including that recommendation until we can get more information. I mean, you didn't actually say that. I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, but it sounds like that's the smart thing to do. Am I correct in concluding that?
I think so, and I was hoping to prevail upon one of my colleagues, Dr. Yu at IBR, to really try and do a deeper dive just at looking at available published data and research that exists, and really compiling a more complete data set for maybe the past 10 years of any published articles that involve on this particular topic. And then from there, maybe we can have some, again, additional discussion with colleagues from other state agencies, and maybe even with the DDPC. Maybe we can look at doing a survey with docs, or with, you know, a subset of some of the correctional programs that are serving, have special needs units. I'm just brainstorming some ideas, but again, I think there might be maybe some other ways for us to gather information, but I don't think that it exists in a way that we can just go out there and say, hey, we want New York State to publish X, Y, or Z.
And other and Chairperson Burke and other board members, would it make sense if you know, we in a future board meeting, perhaps when the next couple coming up, that I don't know how long it's going to take to pull this data together, but once this information gets together, that we have this as an agenda and a discussion item, and
yes,
that might help enlighten us for you know, a really good recommendation moving forward.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Greg.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm seeing heads nodding, and I heard Kristen say, okay. She says, okay, then I'm okay. So I think, so Jill will, like, and Greg will hold that for a future agenda, see what information data we can get. On the other two suggested bullets for action items, I don't know, and this is where I was going to ask you the procedural question, Greg, whether we as a board need to approve those actions, or whether they just go as recommendations. So didn't know what we need to do.
Well, it seems like we have a consensus of the board members that that's a good approaches going forward. So unless there are board members that want to add or disagree with those, I think we could probably you know, add those to the list, and the state should begin working on those recommendations, and you know, hopefully then report back on what efforts have been made to accomplish those goals. I also believe there's another one from last time that Mike had talked about, which was really working to ensure that New York's emergency management system and responder systems are including individuals on the autism spectrum, both in planning the programs and when those services are getting delivered. We do know that there are training programs out there required for first responders, but Mike was getting at something a little different, I believe, and that was the emergency response system. And Mike, was I hitting that on the head, I believe, but I think that's also a recommendation that the board had consensus on last time moving forward. But I wanted to defer to Mike to make sure that we were capturing that right. You know, Mike's an expert in disaster response, so you know, obviously his input here is really important.
Yeah, I think it's kind of around the like the state has the Citizen Preparedness Corps. You know, expanding on that to make it a little more user friendly, more adaptable, because really get that prepared, because in disasters we have the disaster quote unquote cycle, right? Prepare, respond, recover, and also making sure that emergency management, so we have a lot of training for responders like police, fire, EMS. You know, the thing is that adds on, like, you know, the emergency management functions on top of that also do need to kind of be included in some of this training. You know, and also making sure that these preparedness activities are available to everybody, that they're useful, you know, and that they're also connected too, like, and making sure that they're easily available out to the community to help people be prepared. especially in communities that have a lot of intersectionality too. So like when you have environmental justice meeting social justice meeting, disability justice, those communities, that preparedness is critical. Like how do you navigate filling out a FEMA individual assistance form, and having that support and having some familiarity to kind of what resources are out there. What does it mean? How do disasters differ? Like, so if it's a small disaster, like I'm about to be on a plane deploying to Kentucky for a flooding incident, that is not FEMA declared. So it's very different than if it's a FEMA declared disaster. I mean, we don't have to get into those nuances, but like just kind of how do you navigate the recovery part of disaster relief too, especially if, like, for example, I live alone, I own my own house, I own a business. If something happens to Albany, tornado comes through Albany, knock on wood, what are my next steps to make sure that I don't, that I can get what I need to be able to recover. So that's kind of what I think a focus that really needs to be out there is too.
Okay, that's really helpful, Mike. Thank you. Okay. So Greg, a recommendation on next step?
Yep. So I do notice that there are a couple of members of the public who have their hands up. So hopefully we can touch base with them and very shortly. But it looks like the board has put forth 3 new recommendations over this past year that we can include in the next report. We hope to get that out soon. And as I said, the new report will highlight what's been done over the past year or so by New York State to try and address the board's initial, I believe, 10 recommendations. Where we'll talk about the successes that have been made, where there are areas that have, more work needs to be done. There will be 3 new recommendations that we can add going forward, so that there'll be more work to do to keep improving the system going forward. So I think the board has done some really solid work. We're a little bit behind on the reports. I think COVID kind of threw a lot of people for a loop, and I know for OPWDD and our colleagues from other agencies, it was kind of an all hands on deck exercise, which pulled us away from some of these very important functions. But I think we're prepared to start moving forward, getting the new recommendations out there for the public to see and to comment on. So I think we're in a good stead moving forward. But at this point, Chairperson Burke, you think we could try and reach out to some of the people who've had their hands up for a little bit? Josie, I think you're coordinating that.
That'd be great.
How this is going to work, but we will give it a shot. It's really important to hear from people.
Yeah. Go for it, Josie.
Okay, the first person we have is Keston. I am
able to
you.
do certain brain scan and to know if there's something internal that's really affecting her behaviors. Yeah.
Keston,
Yeah.
are you
But then the neuro,
okay.
trying the neuro wouldn't be a bad idea. So if we can get it done, that would be good.
Okay,
but Amy, to answer your question, we don't care if it's a covering, a permanent. We just want them to know what's happening and our recommendations. So we can be more on the safe side, and we could say that we did inform them, and they choose not to do anything, or they choose to do whatever they want to do. But if you ask me, I think she should be in the second.
Josie, should we move on to the next person?
The next person we have is Karen. Karen, I'm unmuting you.
Hi, so thank you for, posting this meeting. I saw it on Facebook and I'm really excited. There's a couple of things that came into point that I wanted to go back to what Steve was saying in regards to information about OPWDD, and then when OPWDD transitioned into managed care with Tri-County, And ironically, I'm a parent of a student with disabilities, as well as I work at CUNY as an admissions counselor, and I also assist students with disabilities applying to CUNY. So Nora's presentation was enlightening. I say this to say that when OPWDD transferred into Tri-County and the other two agencies that are within New York State, there was some disconnect with managed care and how things are managed. And, while I happen to be lucky to deal with the person who was my son's managed care through Synergia, he actually moved into Tri-County and then became a supervisor in Tri-County. And then I just realized he just got a promotion back to Synergia. But him and I have worked back and forth with others issues with students with disabilities. So I personally have that connection, but a lot of parents don't have that connection. And OPWDD is a great agency, and there are a lot of great support services. But when the bridge happened, I think the care managers have too many clients on their teams to manage all of the parents and all of the things. So if you have a care manager, and there may need to have some type of sub-support person that can say, I have this population who has MS, and I have my parents of children who have autism, and I have my parents of children who have spinal cord injuries. And these subcategory people can actually help the care manager facilitate the different needs, because it's very hard sometimes, for these care managers to figure out or even remember all of the things that one client may need. My sister happened to be the national director for workforce development for the MS Society. And her name is Lynette Coleman, by the way, if anybody wanted to Google, but they had a program where if a person needed something, that the care manager would just click in and type in a short sentence of what they needed, and it came up with a listing directory of what everybody needed. And maybe this is, long-term goal, and it probably take a lot of financing. But if there was some sort of huge central database, that if you are a sub-agency like Synergia or Include NYC or CUNY Office for Students with Disability or Empire, Pro College with their program, that if a care manager is looking for something specific, they can type in the search engine education, and then it would be programs for students specifically with autism, because we all know what the 13 classifications are through the state. And, it's more of putting it all together and not putting it on. And like I said, I find my care manager, I can maneuver a lot of things because of who I am outside of Avery's mom, but a lot of parents don't have that, and it's amazing for me to even be sitting in on this meeting. I just happened to stumble across it because it was on Facebook this morning, literally like 5 minutes before. But just getting the word out, there are, even outside of the networking and stuff like that, there are also still struggles with getting your child services through OPWDD, and even with Vineland scoring. And because of my academics profile, I can disseminate my son's psychosocial evaluations, all 37 pages of it. And it's amazing to see that I had to struggle with a staff member on his Vineland results, and how Vineland has to meet a standard of 70 or below. If you have a child who's a savant autistic, and they can do so many. My son reads on a college level. This is, public information. Chris Rosa, who's a vice chancellor for CUNY, they're all fully aware of who my child is. He reads extremely high well, and he has a high comprehension, but he's also in diapers. And so, going back and forth with an agency who's doing his Vineland results, because in order for him to qualify for services, he's got to fall under a 70. And I'm like, so what happens when he falls under a 70? Well, he no longer qualifies for services, but that's not fair. And so I think holistically, with the way services are changing and the way academics are changing and support services are changing for students, for children with disabilities, some of the qualifying results and their levels that they need to be at needs to be taken another look at, you know, and not just straight rigid across the board. Because
Thank you, Karen.
A lot of great points there, Karen. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today about your situation and the recommendations you have for how we can improve services. We'll obviously take all those under consideration, and you have a lot of people here from state agencies where you touched on aspects of it where their agency may provide those supports. So I think that's really helpful to hear.
I think the board should talk about this more.
Yeah, I agree, Kristen. We can come up with a way to put that on our next meeting agenda.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Kristen.
Welcome. Next, we have Ralph. Ralph, I'm unmuting you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay, great. All right, so my name is Ralph Warren, Jr., and I'm on the spectrum, and I've been getting services for, I don't know, with self-direction for about 8 years or so. Greg and others know me. I was testifying at the first hearing that I think was held on your work back quite a while ago, before the report was issued, and I testified in New York City. I just have some quick process questions. I only got on a half an hour ago, so I really didn't get to hear the beginning, but I looked at the transcript from last time. I looked at the website. I don't really see where, other advocates I know that are in self-direction are not very concerned about the work. Obviously, several legislators during the budget hearing and subsequent to that have expressed concern about the delays. We want to have very clear input and productive input at this point in time. I don't see, like on the website, any links to the prior report, what the current work has been since then, what the recommendations are. So we really need to have that. And I'm wondering if you can just give a quick summary I can pass on to other people about, what's available, about the stage of your work, when we will be knowing when the next report will come out, and our opportunities for public comment.
Yep. So thank you, Ralph. I believe we had the old report had been posted. OPWDD did restructure their website over the past year. And so some of the things may have dropped off. I'll talk to our communications team and see how we can make sure that that's accessible and memorialized. And we hopefully the next report will come out in the next 4 to 6 weeks or so. It depends on the review process and the editing process. But over the last number of meetings that we've had, we had covered sections of the report. So everything that's going to be in the report that's coming out had been discussed publicly in the prior meetings. It should be coming out in the near future. We're going to try and put the pedal to the metal and get it out as soon as we can. But thank you. It's very well good points, Ralph. Obviously, the public needs to see what's been recommended and what's been accomplished and not accomplished. So we will work to make that happen. Thank you.
The next person we have is Leslie. Leslie, I'm unmuting you.
Good morning, everyone. Leslie Feinberg here on Long Island. Just wanted to say, Courtney, it was great to hear that you said that funding is a challenge for all the state agencies, and that the board is advocating, and advocacy makes recommendations and makes things happen. Could you tell me a little bit more about how you're advocating during this budget process? I mean, today's the last day. Could you give us some insight?
Our recommendations as the advisory board are given, I think, a lot more weight in the discussions. I am not, and I don't think any members, and I could be wrong, of the advisory board are actually involved in those conversations, because those are the state agencies talking with the legislature. But are the fact that we have developed the report, that we have made the recommendations, that we have passed it on to those staff, and some of them, some of the, as you know, their agencies are represented here on the board. They hear that information, they see the recommendations, that helps to prioritize it during the conversations. A lot of what goes back and forth in those budget meetings, we don't necessarily know the conversations, but we do know that our recommendations have an impact because it helps them prioritize what they should be advocating for. So I think we won't know for a couple days till the budget is passed, whether anything specifically gets included in there. It's always a fight for resources, and we hope that we're having an impact by making these recommendations, having these public meetings, getting that input and providing it to the agencies. Thanks for your question.
Next, we have Ben. Ben, I'm unmuting you.
Okay, hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so hi, my name is Ben. I live in Queens. I'm just comment a little bit about some people talking about the reach out to more community. I'm from the Chinese community. Unfortunately, this is a great advisory board. I attended twice. I heard a lot of things. But in the Chinese community, they do not much learn about this one. So here I'm a volunteer myself. If you future, if anything notice, anything try to translate in Chinese, I can be volunteer. And willing more people from my community to learn about this one. And you do lots of great job. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, that's a wonderful offer. I'm hoping that somebody from the state agencies has a way to get in touch with you, because I know there's probably a high demand for translators. So we would definitely want to follow up on that.
Courtney, this is Vicki from the DDPC. We know how to get in touch with Ben, so we'd be happy to do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
I have no one else to call on.
Okay, great. Well, really appreciate the input from people today. I think we had a very robust meeting between the presentation from Dr. Noor, Syed. Such a great resource. I hope that everybody takes advantage of what she's building there and connects with her. And we've got 2 new recommendations to move forward, one and then a third one that we're going to discuss at our next meeting, plus a couple suggestions for agenda items for our next meeting. Hopefully that's a good summary. Greg, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's a good summary, Chairperson Burke. And to the board members, I apologize. We had a little bit late, and to the public as well, about getting this notice out there. I think we only had a couple of weeks notice, and we're going to strive to do better in the future. Hopefully we're going to plan the rest of the year's worth of meetings shortly and get those up so people have more time to plan. But I do think we have some agenda items that we can use going forward. And I just really enjoy the time and working with the board. And, you know, we've done a lot of work over the past year to try and get your recommendations to the forefront. And I think that some of the recommendations that are going to come out next time, I think are going to be, we find some very receptive people. So it looks like we're chugging forward, and I hope we can make some great progress.
Great. Well, good meeting today. My thanks again to everybody who's on the advisory board and to the other members of the public who contributed thoughts today. And we will see you all at our next meeting. Enjoy the spring.
You too. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.